Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. I am your host Ben Wevel, and today I am going to be analysing and reviewing the 2022 Formula 1 season finale, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The Hermann Tilke designed Yas Marina circuit has been on the calendar since 2009, but last year's Grand Prix was, without doubt, the most dramatic, with the story of the last lap battle between Hamilton and Verstappen and its controversy-marred conclusion a tale for the ages. Another of its most famous additions came a year after the inaugural outing of the race, in which Sebastian Vettel became the youngest ever Formula 1 world champion. The three-time winner in Abu Dhabi had his final Grand Prix this weekend, and I will be summarising his career in an F1 Every Week special episode next week. You can listen to the podcast on the streaming platform of your choice, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 82. First off this week is news from Haas, who have finally confirmed that Mick Schumacher will be replaced for the 2023 season by the no longer super sub Nico Hülkenberg. This announcement on Thursday came after months of criticism over the Formula 2 world champions' mistakes and aggression, which Gunther Steiner commented upon after the switch was confirmed, saying that not even a pole position would have saved Mick Schumacher's race seat. I personally think that this situation has been handled quite poorly all season by Gunther Steiner, who was given very little wiggle room for Mick, and was the first to comment when Mick made his mistakes. However, I can, in some sense, sympathise with the team principal, because even after the financial turbulence of the last few years for Haas with the Rich Energy and Uralkali situations, the team can't afford a driver in his sophomore season to be making rookie mistakes, such as that high speed crash at Monaco. On Saturday, Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff expressed his interest in Mick for a reserve driver role next season, which could mean that he one day follows in his father's footsteps, driving for the German outfit. But despite his current teammate Kevin Magnussen's optimism that the Schumacher name will return to the grid again in the future, I am not as confident, with many drivers more qualified, in my opinion, to take up a place. Also in the reserve driver conversation for the last few weeks has been McLaren driver Daniel Ricciardo, who has been forced to relinquish his seat to make way for the 2021 Formula 2 champion Oscar Piastri. He came to terms with the fact that he's not going to be on the grid next year at the US Grand Prix, and it was hinted this week by Red Bull's Helmut Marko that Daniel would join the team as a reserve driver next year. However, Helmut made similarly confident claims about the IndyCar driver Colton Herta joining AlphaTauri for next season, a deal which, due to the FIA's very stringent super license system, did not come to fruition. Christian Horner was hesitant to confirm this move, despite his colleague Helmut Marko's confidence, because Daniel is yet to put pen to paper. And as we can all remember from 2018, you can never be 100% sure when it comes to Daniel Ricciardo and his dealings with Red Bull. Now on to Lewis Hamilton, and despite setting the fastest time in FP1, just ahead of his Mercedes teammate George Russell, he got into a lot of hot water with the stewards on Saturday morning, after a failure which caused Pierre Gasly's wheel brow to fly off, his right one, resulted in a red flag. Lewis then proceeded to pass both Lando Norris and then he passed Kevin Magnussen in front of Norris under red flag conditions at turn 5. But the stewards decided not to penalise the 7-time world champion, as he swiftly reacted to the notification of the red flag on his dashboard. Finally, before qualifying, Sebastian Vettel organised a track run on Saturday evening, with 200 people invited to join in on a circuit of the track on foot, for the final time with the German veteran. These notables included Charles Leclerc, Mick Schumacher, and F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali. This was the last of some great commemorative moments for Sebastian in his final Grand Prix weekend, including the presence of Sebastian's father, Norbert, who brought along Vettel's first ever race suit to the track this weekend, and 2 special helmet designs to remember Seb, with these tributes coming from Seb's protege, Mick Schumacher, and also from the man that Seb beat in the 2012 Formula 1 World Championship at the final race in Brazil, Fernando Alonso. The sentiment which was reverberating around the paddock all weekend was Danke Seb, and quite rightly, for one of the finest Formula 1 drivers in history. Now on to qualifying, and Q1 began in the twilight of the UAE sky, with Max Verstappen predictably leading the way. Last weekend's pole sitter, however, Kevin Magnussen, was out in Q1, with 16th place, followed by Pierre Gasly, who has only made it into Q3 on one occasion at Abu Dhabi in the past. Valtteri Bottas, this the Finn's first Q1 knockout of his career at the Yas Marina circuit, and finally the 2 Williams drivers who once again were bottom of the barrel. The second segment of qualifying saw Sergio Perez leading the way, whilst Alonso couldn't make it, having been without a Q3 appearance in Abu Dhabi since 2016. Tsunoda and Schumacher followed along, the young German's best qualifying since Zandvoort on his final appearance for Haas, and Lance Stroll and Zhou Guanyu rounded out the top 15. Finally to Q3, and Verstappen put it on pole for the 7th and final time this season. In fact, he could have done so 2 times, with both of his sub 1 minute 24 second efforts good enough for P1 ahead of his Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez, the team's first front row lockout of the season. Following along were the 2 Ferraris, who impressed after a poor showing in the 3 practice sessions, as well as the 2 Mercs, who struggled to convert upon their prior practice form. Lando Norris maintained his full Q3 record in Abu Dhabi with 7th place, followed by Esteban Ocon at P8, Sebastian Vettel, who took his first top 10 grid slot in Abu Dhabi since 2019 in his career's final qualifying session, and Daniel Ricciardo, who rounded out the top 10, but would be forced to take a 3-place grid penalty for his clash with Kevin Magnussen on the opening lap in Brazil. Now, onto my driver of qualifying, and it's Seb. To make Q3 in his final session, in an Aston Martin as well, is a testament to his skill as a driver and his adaptability. This P9 certainly proof that he is able to succeed even though the pressure of the final qualifying lingers around him. Now onto my team of qualifying, and despite Red Bull's 1-2, it's Ferrari. The Scuderia looked very much out of sorts on the Friday practice session, and despite conceding the front row lockout to Red Bull, as I mentioned, that outcome was expected, and Ferrari's domination over Mercedes, their Constructors' Championship rivals, was not. And it certainly stood them in good stead for Sunday's Grand Prix in their defence of P2. Finally, onto my struggle of qualifying, and it's Valtteri Bottas. After such a positive start to the season, with 6 points finishes in the first 7 races and 5 Q3 appearances in the first 6 races, there has been a huge drop-off in form for Valtteri. And to be knocked out for the first time in Q1 at Yas Marina is a massive, massive disappointment for the Finn, who needed to protect Alfa Romeo's 6th place in the Constructors' Championship on Sunday. And finally, on to the final Grand Prix of the 2022 season, and it followed very much in the state of the 2022 season as a whole, with Max Verstappen taking his 15th victory of the season, now the benchmark of Grand Prix victories in a single year for everyone to chase. Charles Leclerc beat out Sergio Perez for 2nd place in the World Drivers' Championship with P2 on the road. This means that Max Verstappen has now won the Drivers' Championship by a grand total of 146 points, and Red Bull have won the Constructors by 205. Verstappen led the race into turn 1, with his teammate Perez pitting for the first time on lap 16 and passing Vettel at turn 9 for 5th, but outbraking himself and conceding the place back once again, before finally completing the move a lap later. Verstappen and Leclerc both pitted on lap 21 and 22 respectively, the pair going for the one stop in this Grand Prix, whilst Checo stopped for the second time on lap 34. The Mexican moved past Hamilton at the first chicane on lap 45, but he struggled to hold on to this position once again and lost out to Lewis on the next straight, finally finalising the pass a lap later. Despite a late charge from Sergio, he was unable to reel in Charles Leclerc for second and had to settle with his 11th podium of the season. 4th and 5th place drivers in the Drivers' Championship, George Russell and Carlos Sainz, were 5th and 6th in this Grand Prix. Last week's race winner not looking as confident this weekend. However, Lewis Hamilton was even less lucky, taking only his 2nd DNF of the season and his first mechanical failure this year. Lewis again started strong, moving into 4th place on Carlos Sainz on lap 1, but going off the track and over the rumble strips in the process. This eerily similar to the incident that occurred 11 months ago on the opening lap, where Lewis clashed with Max Verstappen, went off the track and came back onto the track in the lead. Now, if that incident had occurred today, then or on Sunday, then Lewis would definitely have been flagged for leaving the track and overtaking, and so he was in this situation, as Mercedes team opted to let the Spanish driver back through, with the Brit completing this move finally at turn 9 a few laps later. However, Sainz would get back at Hamilton again on lap 8, the Ferraris looking far more pacey than the Mercs, as they had done on Saturday. Russell and Norris had a similar scuffle in the opening laps, switching positions early on, with George eventually coming out on top, before he made a move on his slowly descending teammate. But only 7 laps later, George Russell's luck reversed as well, as he was forced to swallow both a 5.2 second pit stop as well as a 5-second time penalty, which came along with it, due to an unsafe release into the path of Lando Norris. Russell took on Ricciardo on lap 18 as his teammate Hamilton came into pit, whilst Sainz made a move on Alonso for 5th, after his first pit stop of the Grand Prix. The trio all passed the fast-starting Seb before Sainz and Russell pitted again on lap 40, followed by symmetrical overtakes on Norris and Stroll, respectively. Drama would strike again on lap 55, as Lewis Hamilton was forced to retire from the Grand Prix 2 laps early with a hydraulics failure. This DNF spelled an end to Mercedes' challenge for P2